Hi, my name's Nelson Mason, and I'm going to be doing the track analysis for Estoril. Okay, so this is a lap from quite a few years ago when I did my very first GP3 test, actually. So it wasn't a perfect lap by any stretch, but the approach to the track is proper. The track was a little bit wet on this day, and as I was trying to learn a few things, trying to learn the car, trying to learn the Pirelli tire, and trying to learn the circuit. So by no means was it a perfect lap, but we will definitely get the idea of the track analysis. So run down to turn one. It's quite clean and quite open. Oh, sorry. Here, I'm going to try to just step it back a little bit. So here was about my breaking point. So quite late, of course, in the GP3 car. Big issue I had in sort of this was all still pretty slick. So it wasn't really possible to get down to the apex because down here it was still a bit of a puddle. So I was having to run a slightly wider line. But as we get down to turn one, it does, the visual references do become quite clear. But if we just back it up a touch, so one thing we need to recognize is we do have all of our braking markers on the left side. Coming in here, use those references based on what your car is capable of. I was braking at about 110. And then coming down here, trying to stay off the white line as much as possible because it was a little bit slick as well. But I did struggle with the locking through most of the day because it was very difficult to get the tire temps in. But usually the track's really quite warm, so that shouldn't be a problem. Now we can see what our true apex is here. Our exit is quite open, and we do want to focus more on the entry than we do on the exit. So as we come down into here, we want to get to our clipping point and then obviously be on the gas from there out. The curbs are quite easy to use and very crucial, I would say, use because we have to keep in mind this is a motorcycle circuit. That's its primary use now. So anytime you're at a MotoGP style circuit, the curbs are going to be quite a bit more forgiving. So as we come in here, I had locking all the way, couldn't get it down to the apex, driving like useless, but it was super damp down here. Usually what I would say is the line would be through here and probably have just my front two inside, or sorry, my right two wheels inside the curb here, just as the track is graded up like this. So the curb is like this, and then the track does have a bit of a gradient. So we do want the left side of the car using this gradient as much as we can. And then we have our exit. So nice, clean, wide exit. There's no walls to hit or anything, so we can attack down here quite aggressively. This was just my first test day, so I was really more or less just trying to see how late I could brake, because that was really one of my advantages when I was moving from F3 was I was quite a late breaker. So I was trying to see if I could figure out that advantage in the GP3 car. So we can use all the curb here. Again, it was quite wet, so I was a little bit tentative on the curbs, but usually I would be right over this curb, then coming down. This is a very quick right-hander that we come up to. That's, quite easy to predict, quite easy to see. It's just about hitting it accurately. And if we just rewind back to that for a second. So as we come across here, we will see that, it's there is a nice bit of curb to use along here. It is pretty smooth. It's pretty easy. So for sure, there's track that we can use there. We don't want to get too far over because the corner is relatively straightforward. So we don't want to upset the car too much, but we can definitely use this part of the circuit. I had to, in the GP3 car, which kind of drove like a truck in my feeling, I had to give it a little bit of a lift. Had I been in more of a qualifying scenario, I probably would have been, flat out through here. But I was trying to err on the side of caution, of course. Use all the road. Now, again, we can use all the road here. I don't necessarily want to be running out here and getting my left side tires too dirty or too muddy, especially coming into what is the more technical section. We're going to have a sharp 180 right and then a sharp 180 left and head back down the straight back this way. So I wanted my tires to be as clean and as good as possible, leading from here into this technical section. All right, so here we go. We'll head into turn 3 and 4 now. I'll play it through at speed, and then I'll break down each corner. Okay, so what did we do there exactly? Well, what you'll notice is this car is a little bit of a dragster. It's a 450 horsepower formula car, but the Pirellis aren't a great tire. So you do drive, the tire works much better longitudinally than it does laterally. And the car doesn't have, the car has good downforce, but I was coming from an F3 car, which had about 250 horsepower, weighed quite a bit less, and had the same amount of downforce with much better tire. So I would drive it much harder into the corners. This, you really focus on braking in and accelerating out. So this car taught me a lot because for things like GT cars and things like that, they work much better in acceleration and braking than they do in cornering. So same goes for like radicals and prototypes. So when we just skip through here, I'll show you why I did these corners the way that I did and why I'll suggest that you do as well. So as we come down into here, because they're slow speed long corners, what we really want to do is ensure that when we do get back to throttle, we're getting back to throttle like in one fell swoop. So we're attacking on the way in. So we're braking up, using this hill to help slow us down, braking through, trail braking quite deep, getting the car rotated, and then accelerating out. Okay. So that's really the name of the game. And that's how we carry the speed really deep into this corner. Use the hill so we can see where the line is. The line is, where's my drawing? The line is using this hill here, getting it to the central apex. So letting the hill help us keep the car in and slow the car down. So usually I would say, okay, this is a diamond, right? This is a diamond. But because we have the hill, it really allows us to hold the car in a little bit better. And then if I can change color, from this point on, we're going to be accelerating out. So as we track in here, we get it to really hug and rotate. And once the car started rotated and we've started to open the steering, that's where we're going to start accelerating out. And now a big thing is visual references. We need to know that our exit is out here and we have a line that we can get out to the outside with. Here is where it gets a little tricky. There's not a lot of runoff, and dropping a wheel becomes a little bit more of a headache. But here we are opening the steering. Of course, I'm sliding the rear because the rear was really stiff for the conditions. But you know, we can use all the road. What I would say, a lot of guys try to run out here, but we got to keep in mind that the curb is flat. The curb is nice and flat here, and then it jumps up a little bit, and there's a little bit of this grade. And I don't like, I mean, especially with this car that we run basically on the ground, I don't like this grade. In a GT car, this is no problem. You can run the tires out here, but it depends how clean the track is. It really does. But, you know, again, running out there is great, but the reality is we need to get the car back to the right side so that we can enter this left-hander properly. Because this left-hander, the exit of this left-hander is, you know, the second most crucial point of the entire circuit. So we want to make sure that we get this left-hander of turn 4. We want to get that right. So exit out of here, I bring it all the way over to the right side. And then here is where I definitely did the diamond. And the track was still really slick, as you can tell, because the car didn't want to slow down. But I was, you know, of all the GP3 cars, even though it was my first test, through this section, I was the fastest car. And I wouldn't say that our car had the best setup by any stretch, because we really struggled in some other places, the whole team. And the team did struggle in here, but my approach was definitely, you know, the cat's meow through here. And guys started doing it on the second and third test days. I didn't have the money to do the second and third test days, so there you go. But anyway, so when you come in here, it's really about being able to maximize your braking, get the car rotated, and then making sure that you get as strong an exit as possible. So really getting the car rotated and being able to fire out of this corner. So in here, you know, I would have liked to get a little bit more down here, like closer to the apex, so I wasn't having to come so far out to get it rotated. But the only reason I was kind of missing the apex was just in here. You can see just how wet it is, whereas I'm trying to miss that wetness, but get the car rotated. So as we come in here, it was a little bit damp on the inside, and yeah, it was a little bit damp on the inside, so I was starting to just run it a little bit wide. But a big thing I want you to notice is you know how hard I've turned in while braking to get this car as deep into the 180 as I can. So I've got the car relatively turned in and I'm hard on the brakes and I'm trying to bleed out of the brakes and get the car around as much as possible. But when we look at the corner, which is, you know, like this, let's say like this, and the outside is like this, you know, I'm trying to, on the brakes, I'm going to use pink for my braking. I'm trying to get the car as deep around the corner as I can so that my transition period is quite, I shouldn't use white. I'm going to use black for transition. My transition period to get the car rotated is quite short. And then when I get back to power, I'm like aggressively on power. So I'm really trying to get the car as deep into this 180 as possible. And that's the difference, because what everybody else does, and inherently what everybody else does, is they kind of brake and they brake into here and then they transition to this point and then they're kind of in the throttle, but like I'm going to do dots because they're not really getting to full throttle until here, right? So they're kind of just like, you know, partial throttle, partial throttle, partial throttle, partial throttle, because they're not getting the car deep enough in. I got the car deep enough in, and for sure, you know, what color can I, let's just say I use blue for my line. So I got the car deep in here. I came out a little bit wider, came down the apex like this and exit like this. So for sure, at this point, my minimum speed is lower than their minimum speed. But I'm at full throttle by like this point here, and my speed at this point is higher than here. And my speed at this point is much higher than what the relative speed of the other line would be. And that's what the crucial part is, because then we lead on to the very long straight, and we want as strong an exit as possible. So again, coming in here, I let it come out a little bit wide. On the brakes, I try hard to keep it down, but the car comes out to about mid-track. Like I say, it's about this distance. This distance here is about the distance further out I would be, or maybe half of that further out than I would prefer to be, but it was just the conditions that I was really working around. So come out here, don't worry about the lockup. But you see, actually, that's not even true. I wasn't even that much further out than I would say. It actually looks better in slow motion than I thought. Nope. Okay. I actually got the car to rotate really well at this point. And then it was kind of dry, kind of slick. So that's where I wanted to get back. And complete my double apex. Okay, so I got the car to start rotating, started opening up the steering and getting hard on the throttle, and run over these kind of wet patches, which is inevitable, and have, quite a few moments, and exit out. Okay, but you see how we want to really maximize that exit as much as we can. So we've got the car to rotate. We're getting back into the throttle, and we're hitting our clipping point and straightening out our exit as much as we possibly can. Hitting a clipping point, straightening the wheel significantly more, because you got to think, if we were doing the other line that everybody else kind of does, the car is pointed a little bit more in this direction. But because of this line, we're pointed in this direction, and we're getting a significantly better exit because of it. And let me tell you, you'll see just how long the straight is. But we exit, we clip here, exit, use all of the curb here. I don't like this grass out here, or this fake carpet grass, but it depends what car you're in, whether you can run on it or not. In a formula car, you really can't touch it. Okay, so I'm finding it very difficult to jump around here on VLC. Okay, so down the straight, we have, again, our braking markers. Braking markers on our sideboards here. And with this corner, I didn't brake probably as late as I could have. Again, it was a little bit wet and dry. But coming down, braking in a straight line, and then again, the track does start to grade up for us a little bit, so we can get on the power a little bit earlier than usual. We don't have to diamond so much or at least with this car, I didn't want to diamond so much because I'm carrying enough speed to use quite a bit of the downforce, and I don't want to drop out of that too much with my minimum speed. But coming in here, let me use on the brakes, braking right into the apex, okay, getting the car rotated through here. So this is turn 6. Tricky corner, because when you start to accelerate up the hill, the car grips, but the car grips and ungrips, because although it's uphill, the camber starts to go away from you a little bit, and the rear starts to want to move around just the slightest. So as we get it into the apex, the car rotates well in the apex. And then as we start to get on the power and open up the steering, we can see how the track goes from somewhat of a camber to more of a flat gradient. And that makes the rear want to skate a little bit. And then we'll actually see that the track kind of, goes away from us a little bit. It's not cambered for us. It's kind of cambered away. And, that's just something we have to be mindful of. And there's there's a bump here. There's a bump up here. As we exit, there's a bump. So that all kind of wants to unsettle the car a little bit as well. But because we are going uphill, the car does want to grip. So it's just how much power we can put down to the ground. But really here, we want to get it in and get the car rotated and pointed up the hill. And then we want to be at the point that we can be accelerating and opening our steering, and not run ourselves too narrow on the inside and not run out of space on the outside. So, the key is how quickly we can kind of get to throttle and how deep we can carry that brake in. We don't want to coast around here too much, just with the nature of the corner and with it going uphill, because that's going to constantly cause us to decelerate. But we want to trail brake in as deep as we can, get the car where we're at realistically max load, and we start getting into the power to start opening that steering. And that just guides us and basically scribes our line to our outside exit point, which is way out here. So we want to be scribing all the way to the exit point. Okay. So tricky corner, very important corner, because we want to be able to drive it in here quite hard. We have a lot of runoff out here. It doesn't have any grip, but at least it's there for us in case we do make a little bit of a boo-boo under braking. But we do want to attack under braking. And so driving the car out, it's starting to slide a little bit. There's one, there's two moments, and out to the outside curb. Now you see how smooth these curbs are. So we can for sure use this. Again, I don't want to be using this carpet too much. Now I was here a few years ago. This is from 2014. So they may have paved this or changed the material. This was the kind of, I don't know, whatever they called that AstroTurf carpet, but they may have paved it for the bikes, and that might make it a little better where you can use all of it. I wasn't able to do that at this time. So if it's changed, then use it, but be mindful that there's a serious grip difference between here and here. Okay, you don't want to be dipping a wheel off, because it really can hook you. And a couple of these places, the walls are pretty close. Oh, where are we? Oh, okay. We're gonna step back a little bit here. Now, what you'll notice there is I kind of approached it a little bit differently for what do we call? I think it's right 9. Yeah, turn 9. I think we're calling it. I'll have to check. Where's it? Turn 7, 8. Oh yeah, okay. Turn 7. I think they still call it. So what I did here was I braked significantly more in a straight line and decelerated the car a bit more, and then got it rotated and accelerated out. So I kind of braked all the way along here and kind of got it rotated. And then I started to, I know I'm changing the colors, and then I started to accelerate out. The reason for that is just how much grip the braking zone has. And I wanted to attack in here, and I tried it maybe earlier or later in the day. where I wanted to kind of attack into here a little bit more, but the exit was, I was getting such a poor exit that I didn't think it was beneficial to me. I felt it was more beneficial to kind of get the car to its lowest speed around here and rotated back out. So like lowest speed to here and rotated back down. There's a number of ways to try it, and as we see on the, you know, on the black marks on the track, there's guys that enter in a little bit earlier. The reason I didn't find it was working for me is just because this is so flat, this grade, and then the grade really starts to fall away down here, right? So I was finding that it wasn't holding me in well enough. And if I tried to attack down here, it was causing me to just run out wide a little bit more. But in saying that, it could be part and parcel to my car as well, because when I came here, I expected to really be, you know, I expected to really be entering like this, like trying to get into this apex. But I found from driving the track, I had better, you know, better results going out here and sort of late apexing. And another reason for that is the curb kind of comes out and then goes back. So I was trying to, you know, come around and clip that point there so that I had a little bit better angle on the car. But you might find a slightly better result. So I'm not saying that this is gospel by any stretch. It's just what I experienced and what I found. So coming in here a little bit later and kind of late apexing down the hill, that was allowing a nice clean exit for me, but I still wasn't able to do the kink completely flat, which is the kink after this. So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe it was better to attack, you know, coming down here a little bit more and sabotaging our exit a little bit. But I'll leave that up to you. This is the way that I approached it. I did the late apex, and then where the curb kind of jots out here a little bit before it turns back, I was getting the car to rotate down this line like this. Okay, so I was using that as my real clipping point, and I was getting a killer exit, but was I expensing too much on the entry? That's something I would like to try again. But do keep in mind that the curb is a little bit unique. It kind of goes like this. So I was, you know, clipping there. Whereas you could, if we use a green line, you could come in and clip like this and come out like this. Or, you know, even try to get it to stop and rotate and come in this way a little bit better. I mean, those look like better lines, but I was traveling a lot faster with this line on exit. So, I mean, I'll leave that up to you and how your car is performing in here. But it would allow me to get a really killer exit. And then through here, I mean, it's just a kink, but all that matters here is where we place the car for the chicane. So I'm going to show you again at speed. By the way, car was a complete and utter disaster through there. So there's a lot that we can talk about, but the car was not happy. Okay. So coming through here, now into the kink. So as you saw, I use a bit of curb. Depending on the car, I would use way more curb if I was in something like a, you know, a Porsche or Ferrari or Radical or anything that could use, that could eat the curbs up a little bit more. I would definitely use more through here, but you know, this car hates curbs. So it was a little bit of a difficulty to try to keep it smooth and together. But my main focus was staying as far right as I could, you know, so that I had as good an entry as possible and as open an entry as possible for the chicane. Now, again, multiple ways to do the chicane. So I would keep it as far right as I could and then get the car rotated as well as possible in here so that I was open for the right-hander, trying to improve my exit on the right-hander. I could never get the power down through the chicane. It was damp, it was wet, it was windy. The rears didn't want to work by this point of the lap. And so it was just a massive, massive struggle for me. Um, Taking that into account, you know, the other approach of attacking this one a little bit more. So here's what I do. I would really try to late apex this so that, you know, I have a nice approach to the exit and get a nice clean exit. That was one approach. The other approach is coming in a little bit hotter and a little bit shallower, using a bit more road here, and then fighting through the right-hander. Would that have found me more time? I don't know. I think the way that I was doing it was probably the best way that I could do it on the day. But again, we have to look at the thing is, you know, the chicane is way more of a dedicated chicane than what we would usually see or what we would expect to see even looking at the track map. So there's way more commitment to try to get over to the far side. But there's a few things that come into play that I really struggled with here. But you know, I tried to make the best of a bad situation by really setting up for the exit, and that was the way that the track climbs. So I would get into the left and get the car rotated in here as much as possible. I probably could have used more curb, but the rear was sliding all around. And then getting through this right-hander, but the way that the track climbs over here. So you'll see the track just starts to go up and up and up and up as we come around here. So the grade changes massively, and it was really the GP3 car, which runs so low to the ground, it was really upsetting the front end when it would, you know, the front end would dig and the rear would kind of just slide around. So as we come in here, I would get it rotated nicely. So keeping to the left to really set up for this right-hander, but I wasn't able to eat up this curb like I would have liked to. And like when I walked to the track, I thought, yeah, for sure, I'm going to run straight over this thing and have a great exit. The issue is the way that the track grade is. So, you know, this part of the track is graded like this. This part of the track is graded like this. And trying to run over this, it was just upsetting this portion of the car that was coming around here way too much. Now you, again, with your car, you may have a different experience, but I was really setting up to get as strong an exit as I could out of here. Whether I was setting up too much or not, you know, that's a question I've asked myself for the last 4 years. So, you know, maybe you don't have to set up that much, especially if the left-hander that comes up after this, the kink left, especially if that's not flat. If that's not anywhere close to flat, then maybe we don't have to set up for the exit of this so much. You know, we can attack in here a little bit more so that we have a slightly different, you know, trajectory coming through here and going this way rather than right now I'm kind of going like this. You know, so maybe we can change the trajectories, carry a little bit more speed in, will find us some time, and it won't hurt us as much on the exit. But anyway, neither here nor there. I would really set up for the exit and then try to get it up the hill as best I could. So I'd really try to get as strong an exit as possible, really picking up my exit marker so I knew where I was driving to try to allow myself to put as much power down as possible. So open that steering as much as I could and use all of the road coming out of here. All of the road. So it's quite easy because there is a lot of visual references. There's this guy, there's the fence, there's this wall. So there is a lot of visual references that we can utilize to help us find where we are on track. And oh, I can't pause the video now. Here, we're gonna do this for a second. Okay, so one time more we'll run through this at speed, and then we'll start the last section. I'm on a different lap here, just a second. Can I? Are we good? Okay. Oh, this isn't it either. Next lap. Sorry, the video's so long, it might be this one. Okay, so just taking it back 1 second here. As we roll out of the chicane, get to the right side of the circuit for sure. So that's, definitely a key, because we want to really have as strong approach to this left-hander as possible, because really getting to this right hand side of the circuit allows us to set up most for this left-hander, so that we can stay as far left as possible for this to really set up for the Ayrton Senna Parabolica. So, it's really a massive sequence section, and we just have to be very intelligent by how we approach each part of it. So coming in here, get to the right side of the circuit as best we can. On the approach, I mean, it's very easy to pick up this apex point, even though it's so far away. And the key is to try to carry enough speed across it as possible without running too far wide. So the curb is very easy to use. Yeah, the curb is very welcoming. There's a little bit of paved spot on the inside, which I use here. So you see it's just this lane here. So definitely being accurate through here to use all of this road possible. And then as we come around here, we want to try to hold it just left enough that we can get into the right-hander and carry our speed in. It's very difficult as a parabolica. It would have been so much better if this was a warm, hot day, but because it was wet, there was grades of the track that were wet and spots that were wet and spots that were dry. So I was attacking in there to try to get my time, but it was really, in all fairness, it was a complete guessing game as to whether the car was going to slide on the wet spots or not. So it wasn't something that I could avoid because it was all a little bit too intermittent. But in saying that, I mean, I still attacked it as best I could. And I just had to go in with the mindset that, okay, this time it will stick, and you really didn't have an idea. So I don't use really all the road, but I definitely, because there's not a way to really prepare, because the corner, the way that the corner goes is that it doesn't open and it doesn't tighten. So, and it's too long and we're traveling too fast and there's no grip, outside of this lane. So, this seam in the track that we see here, that goes all the way around. So you need to stay kind of in the inside lane. At least that's where everybody was running. So that's really where the grip was. So there was no real way to prepare for the corner. So I was just trying to maximize everything as much as I could. I was trying to use this curb in here to get the car to rotate a little bit more because I was struggling with a lot of understeer. But again, we get the car in, you're on the power. So I'm kind of trying to steer the car like a boat, like by just spinning the rear tires and getting the car to rotate enough. But, you know, it's really about holding it through here as much as we can, and then being able to see our release point. And, you know, the exit is way out here all the way around. So we need to be able to see our release point and kind of allow the car to accelerate out freely so that we get as best an exit as possible. So as we come around here, there's a point where, you know, here I get the car to finally stick and rotate, because if you dipped a wheel into this here, what we see, this wet bit, if you dipped a wheel into there, then you were out another lane. And I had that happen on my actual flying lap. So, which was a little bit frustrating. But anyway, so you get the car to rotate here, but now is the point that we can actually start to pick up the exit. Now that the corner starts to, just the visual reference starts to open up. So now we can pick up the exit. So now we know exactly when we can get to full throttle, how early, and we want to maximize that. So we want to maximize just hitting the exit at full speed. So it's all about fighting to keep the car in line for this part. And then the point that we can open it up, we want to be the first one to open it up and use all of the road on the exit. So get it rotated here, on the power, on the power, on the power, all the way out. And then away we go using all of the exit. So again, I'll just pop back. Nope. So, and to clarify, I mean, every lap, I was using this bit right out to here. So I was maximizing our exit. This was too wet to use. But, you know, I wanted to maximize the exit right out to here anyway. And I would say, honestly, unless this is paved, I wouldn't use it anyway, because it would cause the wheels to spin. But this, because I was just having the rear slide a little bit, it cost me a little bit of exit speed. But, you know, usually we need to be using all of this. So for sure, this wasn't a perfect lap, like I say, but we need to be using all of this to get as best an exit as possible. Okay, so just to back everything up and run it all at speed, I will, you know, run this lap through, and then you'll have that. All right, and that's Estoril for us. So let's get rid of all this. But for sure, get it down low here. And then here you do have the two line options. This stupid car won't accelerate. All right, and there you go. That's a lap of Estoril.